Hi, it's Tim Hagen from Progress Coaching, and welcome to another episode of Coaching Conversations. And I wanted to make you aware of something very cool that we're doing on a subscription basis, and we'll put a link in each one of our episodes. But every Wednesday, we're going to be doing what we call an audio podcast workshop. That workshop will be roughly about 14 to maybe 20 minutes per episode, with each month having a theme from a coaching model, using feedback strategically, to coaching self-awareness, and so on. So if you could look in the body or in the content description of each episode, and you will see a link where you can join this subscription. These are literally 4 workshops every month teaching specific strategies to address a particular area of workplace coaching as it relates, again, to things like awareness, motivation, teamwork, and what have you. Here's the cool thing. It's only $10 per month, and each month you will get a handout that we will follow along with. So we also give you a tool for you to take notes as we go through each episode. We hope you'll check it out. I think about employees, and I think about all the things going on in the world. And I think we look at things from very unique perspectives, what leaders need to do, what organizations need to do. And we're working with a number of companies right now where we're having direct contact either through coaching sessions, group coaching sessions, training sessions, surveys, what have you. And we're talking to employees, individual contributors. And I find it really interesting. I've seen employees step up. What can I do? Their mentality is, this is a tough time. I get it. And I've had other organizations where people are still working full time, not being furloughed, not taking pay cuts, saying things like, I can't believe they're doing this to us, and everything in between. So I think about employees and I categorize them, and it might be unfair, but I categorize them in 3 levels, and I call it the 3 Ds. The 3 Ds of employee types. The first level is a dynamic, influential leader. They're dynamic, they're flexible, they're agile, they're willing to do whatever it takes, stay late, come in early, work virtually, go above and beyond the call of duty. And then level 2, I call people at this level doers. People who come in and do their job and do it fairly well, but they're doers. Nothing more, nothing less, they do their job. And I would contend a majority of organizations will have doers. Now, a small section of employees are detractors. I'll share a story with you that is very interesting. That I had an employee tell me that, with everything going on, I'm going to start looking for a job. And I said, oh, okay, great. I said, where are you going to go? Well, I got to find a company who's not been hit by this COVID crisis and the new normal. And I smiled, and she said, what's so funny? And I go, where are you going to find that company? I'd love to find them. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, look, have you been furloughed? She said, no. Have you had to take a pay cut? She goes, no. And you could see it overwhelm her. She said, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I'm even considering looking for a job. I said, no, it's not. You're being honest. Yet I want to provide you perspective. And I think when we consider employees and what we can do with them, they're the bulk of organizations. Organizations are not made up of all people with titles of leaders or managers or supervisors. It's typically a major portion, 70 to 80%, are individual contributors or employees. And she was not being negative, but it goes to human nature. What do we do when our backs are up against the wall? What do we do when we have fear? We think about ourselves. We protect ourselves, our family, and we should. That's it. That's a human, natural thing to do. But it begs the question. Here's a person who is not being impacted by the crisis, yet emotionally, she was jumping ship. And she was jumping ship because of why? What reason? Fear, anxiety. And I asked a question. I said, well, how often do you talk to your manager? Well, he's pretty busy, not much. I said, why haven't you reached out? Well, I don't want to bother him. He's busy. I said, so let me understand something. I said, if you want to leave, you have every right to do that. I will not try to talk you out of it. Yet let me give you the facts. You're leaving. You haven't talked to your manager. You haven't been furloughed. You haven't taken a pay cut. I'm going to just share a thought with you. Do whatever you want with it. You're actually doing pretty well. And she started smiling. She goes, yeah, you're right. And it hit me. here was a detractor. And I said, I have to ask you a question. I said, have you talked to other employees about this? Yeah, I have. I said, do other people feel the same way? She said, yeah, a lot of people. See, when people say things like that, what they're really saying is, I'm validating how I'm feeling. See, I'm justified in wanting to jump ship. And I said, well, how many of them have approached their boss? And she said, I don't think any of them. I said, so let me understand. Let me state the facts back. You haven't been furloughed. You haven't taken a pay cut. Yet you haven't talked to your managers. And I smiled. I said, so what's wrong with this picture? She said, yeah. I said, you're kind of putting a lot on management's shoulders. You're going to leave the company, and you haven't even been affected. I said, just remember, the grass is not always greener. I said, I'm not saying you're wrong for wanting to look. And it hit me. Here's someone who's not a negative person, but clearly was a detractor. What do detractors do? We recruit disciples. Have you talked to your boss? Are you angry? Oh, I can't believe all these new policies and changes. And these changes really prompt people to have these adversarial reactions. So it begs the question, why are we upset? And what happens is we forget that we need to talk to our bosses. So again, here's somebody who is not negative, yet was a detractor. And I love the Gallup organization when they talk about engaged organizations. They talk about organizations over 71% are either neutrally or actively disengaged from the organization. Only 29% are truly engaged, committed to the organizational success. So think about that for a second. So how many of your people would you categorize as dynamic influencers? How many are doers and how many are detractors? Now, as a manager and a leader, if you don't know those answers, that brings up a whole nother question. Why not? I think we need to educate our employees on profitability, how the business works, not what the business does, but how the business works. I have a client right now that was hitting some fairly rough times. And during the course of the COVID crisis, they happened to do something that is very needed in the marketplace. So it's really kind of launched the company financially. Now that seems weird, right? You're in a crisis and business is all of a sudden pretty good. People are still complaining. And it's funny, it's created this infighting because there's some people who are dynamic influencers. There's some doers who have become dynamic influencers whose spouses have been laid off and they need this job. See, perspective is powerful. If we give employees perspective, guess what happens? They start to learn of better decisions to make. Yet we shouldn't require a crisis to give our employees perspective. Let me give you another example. We had a client who sent out a quote a week, just one quote a week, and we'd have them send out a quote a week, and the quote just was an inspirational quote, and we asked people to write down and share with the rest of the group, what did the quote mean to you, and what will you use with the quote in terms of applying some of its principles to the workplace? The manager of this team called me up and goes, I've seen dramatic differences. I said, right. Perspective is powerful. So think about a program. Think about something that you can do for your employees. Give their minds perspective, because ultimately, if you want your managers to lead and coach and mentor and direct, you're going to create a society of greater reception. Thank you for listening to another episode of Coaching Conversations by Tim Hagen and Progress Coaching. Now, our company is always coming out with new and innovative solutions to help leaders coach their employees. And recently, we just created a new service called Coach to You, where leaders can pick and choose topics and assign 7 to 21-day programs for employees to learn and, more importantly, apply actions and then reflect and share what they're going to do going forward as a result of the learning. It's called Coach to You. We're literally bringing coaching to your employees. If you're intrigued, we'll have a link in each one of our episodes where you can get more information. And again, thank you so much for listening to another episode.